Hi there. All right, we did talk about having story time, so why not? I thought I'll just read something out of one of my books. So this one is Birds of Cloud House, and it's about the birds who live in the gardens around Cloud House. So um, I think we'll start with the magpie lark. You can see the picture there. Okay, magpie lark story time. These charming birds seem to have a lot of names, with humans happy to argue over which is the correct one. That doesn't sound like humans, does it? I guess none of the names are what the birds call themselves, so it isn't that important. For those of us who remember the movie Splash, do you remember that one with Daryl Hannah? I imagine if we could ask one of these birds their real name, we would get something as impossible for our tongues to pronounce as Daryl Hannah singing her mermaid name. When I was a child, we were lucky enough to have a pair of magpie larks who nested every year in a eucalypt in our front yard. Our house at the time was in an area of uncleared bush blocks, and back then not many houses had been built on, and there was a lot of native vegetation still on the land around about. So, an incredible abundance of wildlife, you can imagine. It was a great place to grow up. When I was a kid, there was animals and birds and insects everywhere, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to spend a lot of time in wild places. Magpie larks adapt fairly well to encroaching humans compared to some species, and this pair were confident sharing the space with us. I was an avid bird watcher. I spent a lot of time reading bird books and writing about and drawing the birds which surrounded our home. So I guess nothing much has changed because here I am doing the same thing. What, 45, 50 years later, I'm still writing and drawing and watching the birds around about. It was fascinating to see the pair create the nest. I had an amazing vantage point as my dad was building a 40-foot yacht in the yard, and the bow of the boat was near the branch of the tree that the birds had chosen to nest on. So I could sit quietly on the deck of the boat just a few feet away and watch the nest. I could watch it taking form, even though it was high in the tree. Magpie larks make their nest from mud, which they magically mix with strengthening material like grass and straw. It's remarkable. It amazes me what birds can do with their beaks. I was able to observe the whole process, from the careful dedication to a solid foundation on the branch, through the gradual construction of the mud walls and the shaping of the cup-shaped nest. All those flights back and forward, carrying this little tiny beak full of mud. Remarkable, such a big job. Both prospective parents worked hard and the progress was steady. Because I spent so much time watching them, I learned some of their language, discovering that there are special calls and flight patterns to and from the nest, as well as distinctive greetings and pair behaviors with a sort of dancing and singing routine. Brolga couples might get all the limelight with their elaborate dancing, but magpie larks are out there in the common bird world, bringing accessible arts and culture to the masses and keeping romance alive. It's easy to tell the male and female apart, by the way. The male has a white eyebrow and the female has a white throat. And the babies, the youngsters, have the white throat and the white eyebrow. So, yeah, just a little tip. Keep your eye out for that and see if you can spot the difference. It was fascinating watching the little ones grow and get ready to fly. The biggest ones in the nest would start clinging to the edge and testing their wings, and after a bit they might hop out and try again, up on the branch, returning to the nest. And over a few days, all the little ones, usually three for this couple, would follow suit and then start tiny little flutter flights to a nearby branch. It's really cute. So the magpie lark couple that live here at Cloud House, I would definitely say they're more colourful characters than my childhood friends. The magpie larks here, they don't nest in the cloud house garden, unfortunately, but we do have a really lovely young eucalypt growing out there. So I'm hoping in the future we'll be able to add these birds to the list of families with nurseries at Cloud House. The Cloud House magpie lark couple made themselves known a few years ago when the female started throwing herself at the big lounge room window. There's an undercover sheltered area. It's surrounded by potted plants and hanging baskets, and the poor young wife had apparently convinced herself that the lovely female magpie lark that she could see in the dark reflective window was a hated rival threatening her happiness. And her partner, he would patiently wait on a nearby gate so he could see her, while this poor lady would attack the window in unrelenting fury. And after a while, she would apparently either be too tired to continue or had decided that her rival had been thoroughly warned. And she would return to his side and they would just fly off. So, over the time, this behavior and, well, should we say, apparent accompanying neurosis has worsened, I'm sad to say. And over the years, this magpie lark lady does the rounds of neighbouring windows, including the big glass walls of a shop front across the road and car windows and mirrors where this dreadful femme fatale endlessly turns up, taunting and threatening. Last year, she sometimes would drop by for some attack practice by herself, and although her mental health was questionable, the pair did manage, amazingly, to raise one youngster. Presumably, while she was attacking windows, her husband was sitting on the eggs and feeding Junior. The fledgling was often sitting alone, or just in the company of Dad, but as far as we could tell, he seemed to grow up successfully. There was an odd event. Once Junior had grown up sufficiently to wander independently, where we heard a knocking at a side window. The lady magpie lark was attacking that window, and her mate was watching. After a while, he was either convinced that it may be true that demon magpie larks lurked in the magic glass, or he gave in to a despairing, if you can't beat them, join them, in regard to his wife's neurosis. He started joining in and flew at the window a few times, but then quickly seemed to realize it was indeed just a mere reflection. And after calling a couple of times, he flew away. And she, however, continued the assault until she was gasping and panting. She's great. Since then, she is increasingly alone, and we have seen her sitting on the bird bath in an apparent trance for 10 to 15 minutes at a time. I think she batters herself so much that she's a bit stunned sometimes. So, whether this sitting and staring is from injury or illness or her own particular quirkiness is unclear. However, despite her challenges, she continues to live her best life and occasionally still hangs out with her stoic husband. Whether they will ever raise another chick remains to be seen. And that's the story of the magpie larks. And yes, the magpie lark lady is still going strong. She often sits on the bonnet or the boot of our car. She seems to like hanging out there. So the other thing that is in the book is a list of magpie lark magic sensory supports and well-being activities. So magpie larks are quick and clever and full of spirit, cooperative and loyal. They bravely stand their ground even against bigger birds. So sensory activities inspired by the magpie lark can help us build resilience and commitment and stay connected to our purpose. And there's just a range of sensory ideas for sound, auditory, sight, visual, smell, olfactory, taste, gustatory, and touch, tactile. I suppose I could read them to you if you like. You might like to try them. So the sound, listen to recordings of magpie lark duets, create your own rhythmic pattern with a partner using simple instruments or tapping, building coordination and connection. Sight or visual. Magpie larks need water to create their mud nests. Sketch reflections in water, real or imagined. Use the focus to anchor your awareness in the present. Sketching can be a really, really good thing. As you know, I do art therapy or combine art therapy into counseling sessions, and yeah, really encourage you to practice creative activities. And art's a wonderful way to process difficult things that are going on in our lives, or things from the past as well that we may not have formed um, memories, not the kind of memories that we can relate verbally, but we often find that we can process them creatively. So smell. After a rainfall, step outside and breathe in the scent of damp earth. And just while you do that, think about this grounding practice as connecting you to the magpie lark's nest building skills and nature's cycles. Taste. Sip a glass of water or mint tea and just do it slowly, reflectively, just using that to really ground and center and focus. Focus on the sensations, coolness, taste, calm, and reflect on the dedication and teamwork in building a nest with those tiny beakfuls of mud that we talked about. And touch. Use clay, mud, even kinetic sand is really nice to form a nest shape. Allow your hands to explore texture and form slowly, emphasizing patience, creativity, and calm. And next time you see a magpie lark, notice its determination and strong spirit, and use that reminder to trust yourself and focus, allowing your true self to shine. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed story time. Tomorrow we'll pick something else to read. Could be anything. Stand by.